Well, I am delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast today is a gentleman who needs little introduction, but I'm delighted to say I'm talking to Rick Witter, who is a singer, songwriter, and frontman for indie band Shed 7. Rick, thanks for coming on the Godcast. How are you doing?
Hello, Alex. Yes, I'm fine. Thank you very much. You missed off radio DJ presenter there as well.
Of
my
course.
long list.
Yeah, well, I was wondering about this, Rick, because you're kind of you're a Stockport lad, but you've spent an awful lot of your life in York, and that's where you have your radio show, isn't it? So, are you a Manc or are you an adopted Yorkshireman now?
Well, I think I'm a bit of both, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't have that many memories of growing up in Stockport because I think we left there as a family when I was about 5 or 6. So, and my memory is awful anyway, so I don't really have that many memories of actually living there, but I do have a lot of memories of visiting family there over the years, which sadly doesn't happen as much anymore because there's less and less of them. But I do remember Christmases and particular birthdays driving to Stockport and Bramall, where a lot of my family lived, and visiting family. In fact, my dad was always one for surprises, so we spent a couple of years living in Torquay, and which is quite a distance from Stockport to Torquay, but he'd just at the drop of a hat decided to go and surprise family up there. So we'd all have to get in the car and drive ages without telling the family that we were coming, and he'd even like walk around the side of the house and go to the back garden and look in through the kitchen window with that was the announcement that we were coming.
Yeah. I don't know who this is the most surreal for, Rick. Me interviewing a 90s indie rock star, or you being interviewed by a vicar. Have you been interviewed by a vicar before?
Well, funnily enough, yes. I have a friend who lives quite locally to me, the Reverend Matt Woodcock, and well, he's more of a friend really than but he used to work for the Evening Press before he chose to change his profession. So he's interviewed me many times for the press. But yeah, have you heard of the Reverend Matt Woodcock?
I do know the name, Rick, but I can't picture the guy, if I'm being totally honest.
Yeah, well, he's had a couple of books out actually that are great. It's like a diary form book about his journey to becoming a reverend and at the same time going through the IVF treatment.
Right.
Then when he became a reverend, he had another one, Being Rev, it's called, where he went to Hull and took over one of the churches there. But he's back in York now. But yeah, very interesting read.
Well, I'll try and track him down. He might be a good one for the Godcast. So.
Oh, he was brilliant. He's a good talker.
Yeah, and are you a spiritual guy, Rick? I mean, I've read about some of your antics over the years, but does spirituality fall as part of that?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I guess I am a bit spiritual. To be honest, you know, I'm just one for living life in the moment and, you know, just trying to enjoy it as much as I can and to the full, really. And, you know, I'm just me. I mean, I guess the older you get, the more you start thinking of life and why we're all here. I have my moments for that, and that's always quite good to put into lyrics as well, really. I'm sure subconsciously that's gone into a lot of our songs, but I'm not one for going to church, so to speak. I mean, I suppose the only times I would do that is when my daughters, you know, in harvest festivals and Christmas do's at the church. You know, I like the imagery of it. I mean, obviously York, you know, York with the massive minster. It's such an impressive thing to look at, and to go inside it is always massively awe-inspiring. And it gets me every time that. So, you know, very interesting.
Was the young Rick Witter brought up in a religious family? Were your parents religious in any way?
No. And I do remember once.
Here you go, Rick.
Well, I was just going to say, I remember once when I was about maybe 12 or 13, they used to have school trips for particular year groups at school, and it was always Cape and Ray, it was called, and we went there for like a 4-day, what I was told was like a 4-day holiday kind of thing, canoeing and all of this, and the RE teacher kind of almost not brainwashed, but I came home after that, and my parents paid for it. Obviously, it was supposed to be a fun week away with friends and doing stuff, but it was quite heavily reliant on praying in the morning and praying in the afternoon and praying in the evening. And I came back a little bit brainwashed and decided I wanted to go bell ringing at my local church. And I don't think my dad was very impressed with that.
Did you actually do it?
I didn't know. No, I think it was one of those things where you're young and impressionable in it. I think I was kind of badgered into it a little bit, but at the same time, I was in bands writing songs, so I was kind of having the best of both worlds in that respect. But no, I'm not. My parents weren't really religious in any way. No.
Yeah. Well, where does your where do your musical boundaries start and end, Rick? I mean, I've spoken to a couple of people who found some church music, hymns are quite deep in terms of lyrics and music and spirituality. Have you got a real diverse love of music, or are you in a kind of a box, as it were?
No, well, I'm guilty as much as a lot of other people probably were. When I was growing up, I was into indie music, and that was it. I was into guitar music, and I had no interest in anything else. That was my thing. And I was always a bit kind of stubborn about liking very popular acts because it was boring, because everybody did. So I always liked to follow bands that not many people had heard of, because I wanted to be that alternative. But then obviously you grow up and you realize that all types of music have positives. There is still particular types of music that I wouldn't really bother with, but as a rule, there's just so many good varieties of music, and that's what makes it so special. The older you get, the more you realize really that obviously it would be boring if there was only one type of music, because everyone would just like that. So it's very important. But soul music's like what you just explained. It's deep and meaningful and very melodic. So yeah, I'm not half as precious as I used to be, and I do think music is for moods. So there's different types of music for any mood that you might find yourself in, really. So, and weirdly, I am a big Smiths fan, and if I am feeling a little bit down, I put Smiths on, which makes me feel even more down, but then it weirdly makes me feel better. It's a funny old thing.
Do you know, I interviewed I interviewed a hypnotist, and I asked him about this, because I'm the same. If I'm feeling down, I go to Radiohead, and I go to my favorite band, Rick, Depeche Mode, and I go to those places. And I think I asked the counsellor about this as well. And the theory is that, well, listening to this kind of music is a reminder that no matter how bad you're feeling, it's not actually that bad, and actually there's something quite spiritual in that, isn't there? I think that
massively so. Yeah, massively. I think that music is so important for that, because you can get lost in it, and it can just lift you. It can lift you out of the fog that you might be in. And yeah, you're right. Bands like Radiohead and Depeche Mode, they do that really well.
Yeah. What I wanted to ask you, Rick, is, I've seen loads of bands live. I haven't seen Shed 7 yet, but you're going on tour. We'll talk about that after. But for me, watching a band can just take. I really like to get into it. And it takes me to a place that I can't get to often. It's a real high for me. What's it like being on the stage? Does that work the same way for you as well? Do you get the real buzz off it still?
Yeah, it's incredible. It's the reason why we picked up instruments when we were like 11 and 12 years old, because we wanted to show off, really, at the end of the day. And that's never left any of us. Obviously, you always have the concern that it's not going to be great, which, it's almost like you're naked on a stage, in the sense that anything could go wrong and then you're the ones that look bad for it. But 9 times out of 10, our gigs are absolutely amazing, and we've got such a faithful following of fans that just love it. And I think the older we get, we feel we've got less to prove, because we've kind of been there and done it a lot in the past. So we're a lot more relaxed now, and we just get into the groove. And I think our fans who persist on coming get time and time again to see us know that, and they know what to expect from a Shed 7 concert. and it almost kind of makes it just a huge party atmosphere every night. Regardless of where we are, we could be in Blackburn on a drizzly Monday night and it'd still be an incredible atmosphere in there, you know. And I think that's really good. But we do put on a performance. We like to entertain. I think, you know, you do go and see some bands and they're looking at the feet as if they're just, well, let's get this out of the way and then we can go do something else. And, you know, I think if people are spending the hard-earned money, then they deserve to be entertained. So we do like to put on a good show.
Yeah. Who are you?
It is incredible standing there on a stage when it's going well and you're playing in front of a few thousand people and everybody's singing every word back at you. It not only does it make my job a lot easier, it also is just such an immensely satisfying and, you know, just an incredible atmosphere. I mean, we're very lucky. We have a song called Chasing Rainbows that we always end our sets with now. It's the very last song we play, and I think people know that now as well who come along. And, you know, there's times where we've left the stage and we might be in the dressing room and you can just hear fans not leaving the venue, just singing that song. It's incredible, really.
I've always wondered what that's like, you know, that moment when you know, they're effectively in the palm of your hand, aren't they, Rick? And it's like a one big happy family, isn't it? Just for those minutes.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah. And as you say, we are going out on tour, hopefully at the end of the year, so we'll get that back again, because we've been missing that a lot, obviously, with the current situation. I mean, it's funny with that as well, because it was starting to get throughout most of last year when we didn't know when this thing was going to lift and end. You know, I think it's a case of what you can't have, you just want even more. So all the way through last year, it was, I can't wait to get out and do that. And now suddenly everything's opening up slowly and it's becoming apparent that these things are going to happen. There is a slight sense of anxiety about it because it's not happened for so long, and it's like, can we still do this? But we have been rehearsing on a weekly basis, and yes, we have still got it. So that's kind of slightly eased my anxiety. But there's one thing playing in a room with 4 other men, songs that we've played and played and played over the years. It's just a case of getting match fit. It's a bit different to actually walking out on a stage and seeing a mass crowd of people. So I don't know what that's going to be like. It's going to be weird.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be fantastic. Who are you? Who are your influences then, Rick? Who are you into as a kid? You say some of those obscure bands. Who are you listening to?
Well, very early on, I think my dad, when I was about 8 or 9, bought me a Shawaddy Waddy single. So that was my first love. And then I kind of got into Howard Jones when I was kind of 11, 12. And then kind of started discovering more guitar-y indie music. I think my brother's a little bit to blame for this because he's 4 years older than me and he got really into Kraftwerk and Gary Newman and Depeche Mode and Blancmange and Einstein and Eibauten or whatever they're called, which was a German band who just bashed metal together to create sounds. So because he was more into the synthy side of things, I wanted to rebel against my older brother. So that's why I kind of started listening to guitar music, really, and just fell madly in love with it. So when I was kind of mid-school age, I was listening to the Smiths, obviously. I was listening to bands like the Soup Dragons, but this is before the Soup Dragons kind of went baggy around the Stone Roses Happy Mondays time. This was kind of more buzzcocksy power pop that they were doing, you know, and, you know, the Wedding Present, bands that not a lot of people would really know about, really. So that was kind of groundbreaking for me in the sense of, you know, because we were learning to write music. It was a bit more edgy like that. I mean, I do remember being a huge fan of the House Mountains as well when they came out. So, yeah, and that kind of fed into what we were writing, even though we were school kids. You know, we enjoyed being in bands. We enjoyed playing in pubs when we were 15, when we were not even shouldn't even be in the pubs, let alone be in the band playing at it. And it was a good road of discovery, really, and learning to ply our trade, which meant that when we were kind of 19, 20, we were ready.
Rick, my just a bit of a tip, really. My daughter, she likes Shed 7, and there's a local band around here called the Telfords who are doing the pubs and things. Just What would you say to bands like the Telford who are just trying to make the way? Is it just go out there and learn your craft? Is that what you get as many pub gigs as you can, get as many live shows going, and because it's not easy, is it, Rick, for guys now? I mean, you know, I suppose in your day and still now, you know, you record sales were key, weren't they? But now it's more about live shows, isn't it?
Exactly that. Yeah, I think the only way bands earn money these days is by playing live, and we are the same in that respect, really, in the sense of record sales and and breaking down the figures of things. My son, who's 20, he's also in a band now. He's fronting a band, and I would say the same thing. Like I say to him, you know, if he's quite good at taking advice. I don't throw it on him. I'll only tell him stuff if he asks. And I can only speak through experience. But yeah, that is exactly it. Just get out, play, get people aware of you. Don't overplay because people get bored. I quite liked the Stone Roses philosophy of not really doing tours when they first kind of broke onto the scene in a big way. They did events and made them special, so more and more people wanted to go to these events. So we would, York's quite a small city, so we would, you know, and you'd find local acts playing the same pubs week in, week out, and it gets to the point where, well, I've seen that now, you know, you've got to branch out a little bit more. So we kind of picked and chose where we'd play in York, and then we'd go to London and play in a pub in front of 3 people, and then drive all the way back straight after it, you know, and put in them hard groundwork of up and down the M1 to no avail at times. We're thinking, well, this is, you know, what was the point in that? But there is a point in it, because you're bonding as people for a start, spending all that time together and working out. Well, again, we were a lucky band because we've known each other since we were really, really young. We went to school together, so we were friends as well as bandmates anyway. But I would just say that, just get out there and gig, and don't lose hope if you don't think it's going very well. As long as what you're doing comes from your heart and you believe in it, then there is a chance that others will follow suit and believe in you as well. And just keep writing songs.
Rick, how much pressure was on you from the label to sell big numbers of records? I mean, I won't keep harping back to Depeche Mode, I promise, but one thing that Martin Gore has always said is that he came to a point where, you know, we stopped writing records to sell. We just wrote what we thought was good. How did it work with you guys? Were you under pressure to put hit after hit after hit out, particularly as the 90s Britpop thing kind of exploded?
Yeah, well, a bit like Martin Gore, I guess. We've never written to order, apart from maybe once. But what I mean is the sense that we never wrote a song and decided what it was going to be before we'd even started writing it. We would just write a set of songs, and then we'd decide what we thought would be single worthy or a B-side or an album track. But yes, naively, through the 90s, we're on a major label and they wanted to see sales. That's the only reason we're on their label, is for sales, you know. And it did get to the point in the late 90s where quite clearly we weren't selling enough records for them, which is why we parted company. And that would be the only reason that, you know, if we were selling millions and millions, you know, you just carry on, don't you? But I remember, as I say, the only kind of time where we were kind of asked to write to order was when the record company, after 3 albums, decided that we should release a greatest hits. And even then we were thinking, well, we've only had 3 albums, but we were gently reminded that we'd had about 14 top 40 hits. So in that respect, we had enough content to create a good enough greatest hits. But they did say to us, we'd like you to write 2 new songs to put on this greatest hits to help promote it. So we wrote Disco Down and a song called High Hopes, which were kind of hits. So it was the only time where we were kind of asked to write to order, and we came up with the goods. But you could sense record company thinking we need to do as much as we can here to sell as much as we can. You know, I mean, they're a business, I guess, at the end of the day, but we didn't want to compromise our art just for record sales at the end of the day, you know. I mean, we did okay in our time. I think now we're a more popular band than we ever have been, weirdly. It's a weird scenario that we find ourselves in. And I just feel kind of grateful grateful and lucky that people still love coming to hear us play songs that we wrote in the 90s, you know, and there's still, as I say, they come along and they sing every word back with passion. So to me, it's the most satisfying thing is these songs weren't just pie in the sky and just liked in a time period. They're obviously there forever for a lot of people, which is the aim, really.
Yeah. Rick, I get really bored with the Liam Gallagher and Noel Gallagher, you know, will they get back together? But you had a hiatus from one another. Was that a difficult time? Was that, you know, what was it like? Have you been with your mates effectively all these years and then you kind of call it a day for a while? What was it like for you?
Yeah, well, again, that harks back to record sales because we parted company in about 99 with the major label and then signed to an independent label who were saying to us, you've had loads of hits, so write us some hits. The problem being is, being on a major label, you get a lot of promotion pushed into you. Whereas on indie labels, there's less of that. So there's less billboards advertising your new single coming out. There's less front covers on magazines. So we found ourselves in a ridiculous situation, really, where we were being asked to write top 20 hits by an indie label. And, you know, it got to the point where you can't do a songwriting session. And the first thing, before even picking up your instruments, discussing, you know, you'd maybe write a verse, and before you've even started on the catchy chorus, you're wondering, oh, is that good enough? Well, do you think that'll chart? And that's not why we're in bands making music. You know, it's supposed to be fun. So that's why, really, at the end of the day, we decided to take a little bit of a break and try and see if we could do other things with our lives. But all of us coming from York and knowing each other well, and we didn't fall out. So, you know, we used to meet up and drink and go for meals together anyway, even when we weren't in the band together. And it was actually Alan, our drummer, who, after about 3 years, said, should we just get together and do a gig? Because that's what we love doing. And, you know, we decided to just put 2 or 3 gigs on sale without any idea of what might happen. And there was just a huge interest in it. You know, we had to add gigs, we had to upgrade venues, and then people were coming and, as I say, singing everything back to us. So it was a real satisfying, great thing. And, you know, we found ourselves doing that every other year now since. And weirdly, we've actually been going longer now as a reformed band than we actually were in the 90s.
Yeah. And was that good? Is that obviously you kind of, how do you reflect back together? Is it one of nostalgia? I mean, I know the fans want to hear the new stuff, and I sometimes wonder if it's frustrating for a band because you still want to make good music, and you still, you know, bands out there still making new stuff, but you get out there on the stage and the fans just want to, you know, they want the hits, don't they? How does that sit with you guys?
It's a struggle because we've got a lot of hits, so it's difficult to work out what to drop from a set list, in the sense that, you know, we have a core set of songs that we can't not play. You know, we'd get lynched if we didn't play those songs. But the problem is now we've written a new album about 3 years ago and released that, and that did really well. So now the extra problem is, what newer songs do you include into that set? Because you can only play for an hour 45 tops. We're not Bruce Springsteen, we're not Prince. We can't just play. So as I say, you have to kind of have your core old 90s hits. We have to play Going for Gold. We have to play Chasing Rainbows. We have to play On Standby. We have to play Disco Down. We have to play Bully Boy. We have to play Getting Better. People wouldn't be happy if they didn't hear those, and quite rightly, because that's why they're buying the tickets, because they want to reminisce. They want to look back at the time when they were growing up in the 90s. But then you have to include some other songs to appease the hardcore fans that don't just want to hear the hits. So it's a difficult, I call it a happy problem, but we somehow manage it every time. So this time we'll probably do all of those hits, and we'll include a couple of album tracks off the most recent album, Instant Pleasures, that we've never played live before. So that'll be entertaining for us as well as the fans, because, you know, I get asked a lot, do you get bored of playing the old songs? And I never do, genuinely never do, because of the reaction it gets. I mean, why would you not? You know, why would you stop yourself from being joyful?
Do you have a favourite venue, Rick? I discovered a new venue, and you've played there, was the Castlefield Ball. I saw the Wombats there a few years back, and thought, what a fantastic, it was absolutely buzzing that night. It was rocking outside. You've got favourite venues that you really want on your tour list?
Well, yeah, you mentioned a good gig. That, I mean, ours was absolutely incredible. It just, everything seemed to align on that day. I think there was, the World Cup was on, or there was some major football competition was on. But that particular day, there was no football on, so that didn't distract from it. And the weather was absolutely amazing. Everyone was in high spirits. It was a great gig. But the Barrowlands in Glasgow is an absolutely immense gig. They've got a spring floor, so just the atmosphere in there, even though everyone's throwing a beer at you, they're doing it in a nice way. But to be honest, again, it goes back to the crowd. We're a very lucky band, and we've got a very, very intensely loyal following. So it doesn't really matter where we are. It's what's happening inside that room that matters. And as I said before, it could be Blackburn on a drizzly Monday night. You know, it doesn't really matter.
No. Is that loyal?
No disrespect to venues, but I think.
Yeah, go on, Rick. Just finish what you were going to say.
Well, I was going to say no disrespect to venues, because venues are very, very important things, but there isn't anywhere in particular where I desperately want to go to, because I just think wherever we are, it is just such an immense atmosphere, you know. So
yeah,
I mean, I could list loads of venues. The Camden Roundhouse is a great venue. The Brixton Academy is a great venue. You know, there's loads of them. We generally play in academies, so the Leeds Academy is great. It's a big square room with a high stage and great lights. So you know, but as I say, wherever we are, really, it's just great. Yeah. I could play in a pub car park and it'd be a great.
You could play at my church if you like. It's a great venue. Yeah. We've had comedy gigs there.
Yeah, well, listen, we did a gig the year that we reformed, 2007, and this was through the Reverend Mad Woodcock, funnily enough. He was he was doing something for charity, and we went in there acoustically to his St. Paul's Church on Holgate and did this incredible night. The acoustics in there were absolutely amazing. They put on some really lovely lights around us, and that was quite spiritual. So yeah, at some point we could maybe come and do that.
Well, that'd be fantastic. Well, I want to ask you, Rick, about 90s music, because my daughter Holly, I feel sometimes like she's robbed the bands of the 90s from me, because they all the 18, 19, 20-year-olds who are into indie bands, they're listening to Shed 7, they're listening to Oasis, Pulp, Blur, all them. I don't know I wonder what you think that says about that era, and also what it says about music now. I mean, these indie bands, to me, I mean, I'm 52, I could be just out of touch, but they don't seem to be in abundance like they were. What do you reckon?
Well, I think it's all cyclical. You know, music scenes come and go. Obviously, Britpop potentially could be the last big musical movement, because of the way that the music industry's changed, and the fact that these days you can just press a button and you've got a song. You know, that whole kind of go into record shops seems to have vanished from the youth of today, really. It's all online, which is why we called our last album Instant Pleasures. But I also, because I do a radio show, I've always got my ear to the ground, and I like to promote new talent. And I am noticing there is like an underswell of young guitar bands coming up again. You know, the Lathams are kind of spearheading this in the respects that they're getting quite popular, and they've got that kind of indie but pop thing going on. My son's band are very similar in that respect. And I think I remember the beginning of Britpop. So we formed in 1990. It took us 4 years to get our act together and write a set of songs that we were happy with, which then became our debut album. But in about 1992, we honestly thought, because Stone Roses and Happy Mondays had kind of been and gone, it was all a bit acid housey. And I think coming from a small city of York, we were kind of the only indie band, really, in the respect of how we had our haircuts and what we wore and the type of songs we were writing. And I think we genuinely thought we were the only band in the country doing that. But lo and behold, you know, suddenly there's a Blue Tones from London, and there's a Sleeper from down south, and there's a Cast from Liverpool, and there's an Oasis from Manchester, and so on and so on. And all of us were probably thinking the same thing. You know, we're just doing something a bit different, and that collided together and became Britpop.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of hopeful that might happen again at some point. I can feel something, maybe in the next year or two. I think there might be a really healthy indie guitar-y kind of scene again. Maybe not as big as what it was when we were there. But one thing I am quite impressed to hear is your daughter and her friends liking stuff from the 90s, because that will keep us going for the next few years. So can you thank your daughter from me?
Well, yeah, I mean, she really does. She genuinely loves indie bands, and a lot of her mates do as well. You know, she goes in I think she prefers the bars and the clubs where they're playing the indie songs rather than the dance music and stuff. Who did you enjoy of the 90s, Rick? Who did you like listening to?
Well, there was loads of good stuff. I really enjoyed the Long Pigs. I mean, we had a lot of band supporters that went on to kind of probably do a little bit better than us. And that the Long Pigs, the Stereophonics supported us way back when. Just loads of really good Super Furry Animals. I really liked them.
Yeah.
And it's nice now because you do bump into these bands and at festivals and whatnot, and there's no kind of sense of rivalry anymore. There was a little bit of that going on in the 90s because it was such a big thing. But nowadays, I think we all kind of meet up at various different outdoor gigs and just have a right good laugh and get on really well. One thing I am noticing, talking about your daughter again, I am now noticing more and more over the past few years that people who are coming are bringing their children with them to our gigs. And it's not like they've been dragged there under sufferance. We're seeing 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds coming, and they're singing every word with the mums and dads. And that is absolutely fantastic, because that means we will become the new Rolling Stones. We'll be here when we're 90.
It's great, though, isn't it? You know, I mean, I've always had this thing, Rick, about Depeche Mode, is that as long as the music's good, I'm you know, if it just became a bit ridiculous, then, but I still think, for me, they're still producing great stuff, and I'm sure that applies to you as well. Who, you know, in the 90s, you were talking about those bands, but I just want to go back to your kind of initial love, because I do like my electronic music. Do you still like listening to? Have you still got that interest in the electronic bands? Blancmange were the first band I was into, and I just thought they were brilliant. I just loved the way they took music in a different direction with the Indian kind of percussion sounds. Just reminded me of Kula Shaker, who did was it Tap Bar, and I just thought it's fantastic. Do you still hold that interest in that electronic sound, even though you?
Well, it was, as I said before, it was because of my brother that I steered clear of all that when I was young. But now I totally get it, and I love it. Yeah, and you know, how could I have not liked Kraftwerk when I was young? Because it just groundbreaking and inspiring. Yeah, you know, what I tend to do now is I download a lot of music and I just shuffle it. I just love shuffling, and then you know, this stuff that I've forgotten that I've bought, and if I'm shuffling, things will come on and I'll go, what's that? And remind myself of why I liked it in the first place. So I can just spend hours shuffling, and that's not a euphemism.
Well, do you know, I have this argument with my wife, because I say she's stuck in the 80s and the 90s, and I love discovering new music, and I'm always on the lookout for something new. And I do just what you said, I whack it on my Spotify and shuffle it, and I've discovered some really good new music. But I think some people of our generation just like to just stay where they were, you know, but so anyway.
Yeah. Well, again, regardless of radio show, I mean, it helps having a radio show, because for that 2 hours I can play exactly what I want. I'm not restricted by anybody. I can play whatever I want, as long as obviously there's no effing and jeffing in it. But you know, I would do this anyway, but I just love discovering new things. You know, I love it, and the biggest buzz I can possibly get is if I hear a song and I like it, and then find out who's done it, and then discover that they've had about 4 albums out. It's just brilliant, because there's so much back catalogue to go and dip into. So And that does happen from time to time, and it's just the best thing. And the first thing I often think, if I hear something new that I really like, I'm playing that on my radio on Sunday. You know, I want to spread the word. I want people to hear it, you know, which is great.
Yeah. So who's really ticking your boxes at the minute then? Is there a band that you can recommend for us to go and download? Because I know I will.
Now that's a good question off the top of my head. You've put me on the spot. I've
been listening to I think they're called Twigs, Rick. Have you heard of them? American band.
Oh, yeah. I like their first album. That was good. Have you heard of a band called Foxygen?
No.
Right. Well, they're a bit kind of hot and cold, but there's a particular album called We Are the 21st Century Ambassadors of Peace and Magic or something, and that's a brilliant album. That's really one worth. I mean, it's actually a few years old now in the respect of newer bands, but that is a great album. There's so many, I just can't. I'll have to text you.
Well, Rick, it's been a real pleasure and a privilege to talk to you. I absolutely love my music. I really do. And you've got this tour coming up, and I was looking. Well, you're not. I don't think you're going to be concerned about ticket sales, because quite a few are already sold out, aren't they? But I noticed you're doing Peace Hall at Halifax. Have you played there before? That's slightly unusual.
Yeah, no, we've never done it before. It's a bit like when we did the Castlefield Bowl. It's supposed to be our big summer celebration, which should have happened last year, and then it's been pushed back twice. And we should be doing it now at the end of August, I believe. So that will be our first gig back, which kind of harks back to what I was saying about anxiety, because we've not done anything for a year and a half. We have started rehearsing and we've worked out what we might be playing at that gig, but it's going to be a bit weird after not doing anything for over a year and a half to suddenly stroll out on a stage in front of 5,000 people and swing my hips. It's going to be a bit weird. But I'm hoping that everyone there will feel the same, because it will be a bit strange being part of a 5,000 strong throng of people and being in the middle of that, because everyone's kind of learned to adapt to having their own space. So, I mean, I'm quite claustrophobic at the best of times. So, you know, at least I'm on the stage and I've got a little bit of space around me. I can keep telling the rest of the guys to back off on the stage.
Yeah, and you got a couple of decent lads supporting you as well. Just tell everybody about who's supporting.
Yeah, well, it was our decision to go all Yorkshire, to be honest with you. So we've got the Wedding Present, we've got the Pigeon Detectives, we've got the Skylights, all Yorkshire acts, and it's happening in Halifax. So it's a celebration of Yorkshire. So if anyone wants to bring the pies and the flat caps and the whippets, they're more than welcome.
And that applies if you're from Lancashire as well. We're literally across the border, really, just down from Halifax in Burnley. So, have you ever been? Yes. I always have a question, Rick. Have you ever been to Burnley? Is that a place you've frequented at any time in your life?
No, I think we might have done some.
Probably did King George's Hall at Blackburn, did you? That's probably the nearest.
Yeah, but I think we did something at Burnley's football ground once as part of some corporate event, if I remember rightly. But we've not ever played an actual gig in Burnley. Where is it to play? What gig venues have you got?
Well, we got the Mechanics, which is not a bad venue actually. I'm sure you know the Milltown Brothers, who were kind of fringe '90s indie band. They're local to us, and they did try a bit of an outdoor festival at the park not too few years back. But yeah, it's we've got some good places I can think of. You know, St Matthew's Church is a great. We've done a few comedy nights there, and it's and everybody says the acoustics are brilliant. You know, so but anyway.
Yeah, we'll get the fairy lights out and we'll be there.
Right, Rick. Well, thanks for coming on, brother. Thanks for giving us a trip down memory lane and sharing some of your experiences with the brilliant band that you're in. And we wish you well for the summer. Hope all these gigs come off, and go online and look for tickets now. They're out and available.
Great stuff. Thank you for having me, Alex.
Cheers, Rick. God bless.
Cheers, mate.